Hello, I am Jonathan Neal. I'm the director of the Center for Business and Management of the Arts at Claremont Graduate University, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the future of art fairs and probably some talk about the election and politics and its effect on the art markets too. This is the fifth of our arts and culture conversations that we are hosting this fall. You can find out more and register for those conversations at cgu.edu/events. And you can find out more about our art business and arts management programs at cgu.edu/CBMArts, CBMArts. Before we begin, I'll request that everyone please keep your microphones and your videos off during the conversation. This way we see only our speakers at the top of the screens and you can hear them regardless of which Zoom view you've selected. And if you have questions for the panel, please put them into the chat and I will field them to Ki-Bum Kim, who is our organizer and moderator for today's conversation. I think as most of you know, Ki-Bum is the head of our art business program at CBMArts, and he teaches courses on art law and the art markets. He is also a partner, importantly, of the Gallery Commonwealth and Council here in Koreatown in Los Angeles, which was just recently the subject of a profile in Whitewall magazine, which noted how the gallery has grown in both critical acclaim and collector recognition. And so I'm pleased that Ki-Bum is here to have this conversation with our two panelists. So Ki-Bum, over to you.
Thank you. So once again, my name is Ki-Bum Kim. My pronouns are he, him. Being located in Los Angeles right now, even though we are getting together on Zoom, I'd like to acknowledge that I am based on Tongva land, and I am an East Asian male with growing out COVID bleached hair and a bright pink room. This week we will be speaking about art fairs. So in my, as a gallerist, in many ways, Commonwealth and Council started as an artist-run space, and when we sort of turned into a commercial gallery that represents artists officially, I think one of the biggest changes that happened in what we do is our active participation in art fairs. And fairs in many ways have radically changed and grown the art market and the industry in the past 20 years. It has also played a huge role in the growing interest in contemporary art. This year is a bit of an interesting year in that it really features a changing landscape for fairs, as we have been unable to have these large gathering events like fairs or concerts and events like that. So I'm very pleased to have our guest speakers today. I will briefly begin with their bios, and you'll see that they're very well positioned to speak on fairs and the landscape. So Noah Horowitz has served as Director Americas for Art Basel since 2015. Prior to this, he held a 4-year tenure as the Executive Director of the Armory Show in New York after directing the first ever online-only fair, the VIP Art Fair, in 2009. Noah also holds a PhD in art history from the Courtauld Institute of Art and is the author of the book Art of the Deal: Contemporary Art in a Global Financial Market, which is prominently featured on our slide. And he's a frequent lecturer on contemporary art and economics, and his writings have appeared in publications including the New York Times, Texter Kunst, and the Art newspaper. And also joining us is Sonia Yu, who is a creative director, business coach, and philanthropist dedicated to cultivating local creative communities and igniting positive social change. She's the co-founder and chief creative officer of 419, a creative agency and studio space in San Francisco. And Sonia also serves on the selection committee for Fog and Design Art Fair in San Francisco, which has generated a very strong presence in the Bay Area art community in recent years. And she also has ties to Los Angeles community and serves on the board of the Hammer Museum. So thank you both for joining. And to start the conversation, so As mentioned, Noah, so one of the things that we discuss in our classes is about how the art market has changed and grown since the aughts, and really, this is kind of like my own personal take on it. Perhaps the biggest catalyst for this has been the big boom in art fairs and the role that Art Basel Miami Beach, since its debut in 2002, has played in that. So could you start us off by speaking a bit to kind of the history of the fair and Art Basel, and how you see how Basel Miami has changed the kind of the entire art business?
Yeah, thanks, Kibum. I mean, it's a big question. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I should also state clearly up front that we've known each other for a long time, going back to teaching days, also with Jonathan. So to those that are listening, you guys are in fantastic hands with these two, and I'd be curious to maybe take a Zoom class with you from remote when I'm not speaking to you as Sonia tonight. Art Basel was founded in 1970, so this is actually our 50th year, and we had planned a whole lot of things, like many other people this year, and those got derailed. And I think when we think about Art Basel as a fair platform, I think there's a few chapters we think about it within. And in the early days, really starting from the 70s when the fair, which was founded by Ernst Beiler and several other dealers in Switzerland at the time, a few years after Art Cologne was founded in 1967, which really is the, sort of the date that historians would date the sort of first of the contemporary modern art fair phenomenon of their kind. Basel quickly became a large fair, exceeding its European grounding at the time. Into the 80s, there were really two big fairs in the world. There was Art Chicago in the US market and Art Basel. And throughout the course of the 90s, which was the last moment the art market had a real lasting recession and restructuring, the market for fairs was largely, it was a real trade fair platform, largely dedicated to the trade. They weren't really the mass market events that they've come to be known as. They were, you had your three whirls, and dealers put a lot of paintings and a lot of sculptures into booths. And that was basically the recipe for the first 3 decades or so of Art Basel. And frankly, for most other fairs, you had regional fairs, you had, FIAC in Paris, you had medium specific fairs, but the art fair phenomenon and the event-driven phenomenon of our industry hadn't really set in. And Art Basel's expansion to the US market, which was originally set to take place actually in 2001, and was then delayed a year due to the lingering effects of 9/11 at the time. It's actually the only other time that we've ever canceled an art fair prior to 2020. But by the time you had the launching of Art Basel Miami, the phenomenon shifted from sort of fair as trade fair and commercial platform in large part for, I wouldn't call them insiders, but a smaller collecting community and more of a professionalized community. Miami switched that on its head. You had the advent of the fair week. So you had collection visits, collectors opening their homes. You had programming and programmation, whether it was film programming, talks programming, the whole formula that has gotten built up and that we now take for granted to create a real contextual apparatus around the fair, not to mention the dinners and the events and the parties and all the extracurricular activities. Art Basel Miami Beach, I think if you were really to write your case study now with the better part of 20 years perspective, I think would date as the apex of that. Frieze in London was founded the following year, and then subsequent to that, you've had the sort of resounding outpour of a lot of other fairs of all varying shapes and sizes. Of course, we ourselves acquired a fair in Hong Kong. It started as Art HK in 2008, and our organization acquired and ultimately sort of rolled Art HK into our Asian fair as Art Basel Hong Kong. Several years after that. And so I think the lingering effect of the legacy, in a sense, of Art Basel Miami Beach was not only was it a fair that helped bridge geographies and throw light and weight on Latin American art and the artistic and cultural communities of Central and South America, but you really had the shifting away from, art fair and really auctions at the time as well, up until then were, again, more insider affairs, and you had this shifting outward into the spectacle week, with all the things that we now know them to comprise. And I think that, as well as just the fundamental generosity of the private collectors that really backed the fair, that opened their homes and created this totally different sort of force field around the show, and the show week was very different. We never had that before in Switzerland in the same way. And in Switzerland, these extraordinary institutions, you have the Beiler Foundation, you have the Kunstmuseum and the Kunsthalle, and all these extraordinary cultural epicenters, but you didn't really have that sort of that personalized experience and that fair week experience. So I think the legacy in many ways is one that's been replicated, but a lot of it originates from that moment, Miami.
Yeah, thank you. And Sonia, you've been involved with Fog Art Fair and just like the larger art and cultural scene in the Bay Area. So could you speak to us a bit about kind of Fog's approach? It's always had a much more of a boutique feel. It gets, many of the best galleries from around the world, but it's kind of smaller, very much catering to the local scene. And in my mind, it's something that has also coincided with this kind of exciting, burgeoning contemporary art scene in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from all the things that you just talked about actually are mirrored in San Francisco's unique culture and market. It's always been a very different market. The way that finances, culture, politics flow and continue to flow there just has always kind of bucked any kind of stereotype. You see LA has a stronger personality. New York has a stronger personality too, but San Francisco has always kind of been a little bit more shape-shifting and going with the flow. So as a result, the fair in a way has to be representative of that. I think for things to work in San Francisco, it really requires local knowledge and understanding that there are these different facets of the community and the culture here, and it can't be the same approach that is used otherwise. So it really took a group of passionate volunteers that really wanted to celebrate San Francisco's rich history of being a hub for art and design and experimentation. But at the same time, I think, San Francisco becomes a very bubbly place, especially tech. Being there, I often say it becomes the beta test city for the city that never really exists. I remember when there was a delivery app for like just cookies. And it was one of those things I was like, okay, it's not gonna last, but we're gonna enjoy it for this moment. So, there's this opportunity for San Francisco to really open itself up and really start connecting with outsiders, start to dispel stereotypes and humanize a community, to be like, come in and like see what we're about. I understand that there might be a miscommunication or a stereotype, or I don't know, things just haven't worked before, but maybe get to know us and figure us out a little bit. And just like Noah was saying, one of the special, moments or things that come out of Art Fair Week is this special moment. It ignites a community, ignites a city for the moment. And it's a treasure time to kind of celebrate the community, to learn more, to walk or talk in the city's innovative spirit, and to make that connection, and because sometimes I think San Francisco becomes forgotten as things, big things happen in New York and LA, which I deeply love. And I'm so guilty of like going down to LA to experience more culture. But I see how things kind of pass by San Francisco. And I really see this as an outreach of like, of a welcoming spirit, and to connect with the larger world that maybe doesn't quite understand the community, but this is the opportunity to. So there are many galleries and the institutions put on special exhibitions. You know, really thankful for the strong collector community that is here, but also so thankful for the people who are willing to come to San Francisco with an open mind and open heart, to understand what the art community is like.
Yeah, and back when we were able to travel, I've been to Fog a couple of times, and something that really struck me is like, I mean, it's always felt like a very high quality, like a jewel box experience of a fair. I think it was kind of like an earlier fair that took that strategy, even before it became a bit more popular with these sorts of smaller, more local fairs popping up. And something that I found interesting is because for a long time the Bay Area has been a very strong, has had a strong collecting history and community, but probably the older wealth who were who were big collectors of like impressionists. And perhaps like the interest in contemporary art is something that coincided with the rise of like the tech industry, and how that has changed the culture. And of course, Fog has also been intimately connected with SF MoMA, and it's sort of what should I say? It's like a not a wholly like new mission, but like a more of a new focus on contemporary art, like working with younger artists. You got Eunji Ju, who was hired for the first time as like a contemporary art curator at SF MoMA. So can you speak to that, like that kind of change and growth you've seen in and then the interest surrounding contemporary art in the Bay Area?
I think, you know, Unji's hire and SF MoMA's new direction, all these efforts are a real reflection of the strives at attunement that the art community is making to understand that it has been a very not diverse collecting community. And in order for the art community here to continue to grow and thrive, new people need to be included and want to support those things. I think it complicates things when San Francisco has become subject to a very monolithic culture that has driven a lot of decision making and how the city is run otherwise, thinking about how more gyms are opening up, or pre-COVID in San Francisco, than restaurants, because Mark Zuckerberg started working out more and started, Soylent becoming a thing. And then people started not leaving their desk. And that really started to affect the culture and businesses of San Francisco. It was less diverse as a result. So there's a lot of San Francisco recently that has really shown how that monolithic culture can stall progress for a culture.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so many, it's one of the cities and areas that has changed so radically in recent years, and it's been very exciting to see the cultural changes too, but definitely see the whole kind of monolithic ways in which things can be reinforced.
Yeah, I mean, but it's an interesting comparison, because I've been coming to Fog, as Sonia knows, for years now, and try to get to the Bay Area in normal times a few times a year. And I think one of the great things about Fog and about the city's cultural infrastructure is that it's very legitimate and earnest. You have this history, certainly through craft, through music, through other kinds of culture, not just the visual arts, also the visual arts as well, of course, with some fantastic Bay Area painters, et cetera, that we all know and love. So it comes from a very genuine place, and I think there's just amazing institutions as well, whether it's SF MoMA, or the Wattis, or on the other side of the bay, in Berkeley and down into the valley. So in a way, it's sort of an inverse paradigm from, say, Miami, which in many cases was built up and sort of constituted itself around the aegis of the fair. One of the things that's interesting in Miami is, like, we're now next year's our 20th anniversary. In the early days, there was this idea that Miami would grow into this sort of gallery hub mecca. Emmanuel Peritan in early years had his outpost there. Fred Snitzer's been with us since the beginning. And although, if you look at the numbers, I think the city is on record saying that, at the beginning of Art Basel Miami, at the turn of the millennium, there were like a half dozen galleries, and now there's over 150 galleries or something like that. But the reality is, at an Art Basel level, we've never had more than a handful of galleries locally. And interestingly, from our vantage, it's not actually the commercial gallery infrastructure that's grown around us, but you now have this totally resilient institutional infrastructure that the role of patronage and civic support for the arts has grown magically. You have the ICA that opened their new permanent home in the Design District. You have the amazing Herzog and Demeron Perez Art Museum. The Bass underwent its renovation several years ago. And so you have this really interesting alchemy at the institutional level. So there's this really powerful thing that can happen in the relationship between a fair and what it can do to the sort of public imagination of a city, as well as the role that a fair can play, not just in supporting artists and galleries commercially, but in creating a real earnest dialogue. And I think San Francisco and Miami are sort of opposite sides in a way of the same coin. On the one hand, they're totally different. On the other hand, there are some pretty interesting sort of similarities and parallels. And I personally have greatly enjoyed coming to the Bay Area each January, to really see that and be part of it. And of course, there you also have this really intimate relationship with the museum as well. I think the opening night gala, all the tickets and things go to support the institution, which has been really great to watch.
Yeah, and something that we speak about a lot in our classroom discussions too is how the art world is really an ecosystem. So just as you said, Noah, is like you do have to have all of the different facets and the players, and that you can't just have galleries, you can't just have artists, you have to also have the institutions, the schools, and something that I've been feeling very acutely this year is how fairs have been such pivotal meeting places for all of us. Like I probably see you, more than a lot of my friends in Los Angeles, and at the kind of like that busy travel schedule on the international circuit that we've all been on for working in the art world. So of course, in 2020, it has put the brakes on a lot of that, and it presents challenges for this kind of the part of the art world and our discourse and transactions that happen through the fair platform. So can you speak a bit to how Art Basel has been navigating? Of course, there have been these OVRs in lieu of the physical fairs, and then not just replacing what would have occurred in Hong Kong and Basel and Miami, but this month and last month, there were these kind of standalone OVR fairs, and how you're trying to kind of engender a continuing conversation and connection in really that has become a global audience.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great and pretty fundamental question, right? Our shows in a normal year, we work with over 500 galleries that participate in at least one of our shows. Those galleries come from, something in excess of 40 plus countries. We attract audiences of over 250,000 people, right, that come to, our shows across each of the show weeks. So pivoting from that to something that's totally digital is a pretty radical move in an industry that, truth be told, has been slow to adjust to the digital sphere. Sales in the art market, transactions lag other retail sectors. For example, we've tracked some of this in the art market report that we published annually with UBS that Claire McAndrew writes. So as a business, I mean, already heading into this year, of course, we we're already investing further in doing more here. We had already had a plan to launch a sort of test balloon online viewing room in parallel with our Hong Kong show. At the time, we had intended to do that maybe for a few dozen galleries. With the cancellation of our show in early February, we flipped the switch and brought that forward for all galleries. So as I think you were referencing in March for the canceled Hong Kong show, we gave this digital platform to all 250 some galleries that had been accepted to the show. We did that again in June with the Basel show when it was canceled. And in September, we did something which was for us different, also for the for the fair industry, which was different, which was sort of de-anchor an online viewing room platform from the actual moment of the fair. And so we launched two concept driven viewing rooms, the first of which was for sort of a capsule for works created just this year. So we limited that to 100 galleries that each could show a half dozen works. And then we followed that just last week with a 20th century capsule for 100 galleries with 20th century works. Also really just sort of to test. I mean, they came in at very different price points. 2020 viewing room being, substantially lower than the latter. And there were interesting lessons we learned across both of them. I think one thing that we took away from last week's viewing room was that galleries in Asia actually did disproportionately well, right? We're still trying to unpack exactly why that happened, but at some level, I think it also has to do with, saturation levels and people's attention spans. I think, galleries in the US market trying to show 20th century work by artists in this market on the eve of the US election is just a more challenging thing. And I think we found some of our gallery partners in Asia had a more receptive audience. It's like super interesting finding. You don't know until you do. And so clearly, as we head into next year, we're going to look to do more and more of this. We're all sort of trying to test the market collectively to see how we can cultivate what we know happens digitally. We know that people sell plenty of art sight unseen via JPEGs, et cetera. We also know from this mid-year study that we published with Claire and UBS that most galleries that are selling online are selling to existing clients, and in large part they're selling artists that a client already has a relationship with. So we now know that through data, and that's interesting. And I think also we want to grow that in the future. With Miami, in December, we're bifurcating it again a little bit. There'll be an online viewing room capsule for all of the galleries that had been accepted to Art Basel Miami Beach, but we're going to bring a more colorful Miami flair to the event as well, and also highlight a lot of these events that will be happening in Miami at the same time. Despite the fact that Art Basel Miami is not alighting in South Beach this December, it came to our attention that all the local museums and institutions were talking with each other and all planning in any case to do activities to host exhibitions that week. And so we'll be doing what we can do to shine a light on that. Design Miami will be doing a pop-up in the design district. Craig Robbins, who's a great collector, design collector, is also the founder of the design district, is speaking to a lot of galleries that regularly do Art Basel about taking pop-up spaces there. So we see our role in an increasingly hybridized way. And I think as we all collectively get more comfortable in this sphere heading into next year, I think you'll see a lot more push and pull between the IRL and the digital, and audiences large and small getting more comfortable with how to play through that and how to create and story tell through that as well. And ultimately, I think with that comfort and with that proclivity will come more transactional activity, and will come more experimental ethos, as people will be more comfortable inquiring and learning about artists that they didn't know, about gallerists that they were unfamiliar with. But it's a learning process, and it doesn't happen overnight.
And Noah, also quickly, I think you have such great insight into this. As mentioned in your bio, you were behind the very first online art fair, the VIP art fair, about 10 years ago. So can you speak to what you think have been the biggest changes in those 10 years? And I mean, in some ways, we're forced to do everything online now, but and what you think are aspects that we still need to work on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, interestingly enough, the technology, like if you did a side by side, right, of like what the Art Basel online viewing room looks like today, or what the Frieze online viewing room looks like, or even what like some of the major galleries are doing in their online space, it's not radically different by any stretch from what we did 10 years ago at the IP Art Fair. So that's fascinating in and of itself. The fundamental technology, how you look at images online, has actually not changed. What's changed is that people actually do stuff in this space now. Social media didn't exist as a phenomenon 10 years ago, right? People's willingness to buy sight unseen any kinds of things, whether it's shoes or iPhones or Netflix movies or cars and airplane tickets, has changed radically. So I think in a way that the two of the most fundamental things is basically how people use technology to communicate, look at images, look at and absorb and also produce content, but also, of course, the journey of the sort of acquisitional journey online has changed. The other fundamental thing that's changed, and I think this is an equally important one, is artists' own relationship to that. There was a moment in which artists like didn't want to have this digital presence, didn't feel genuine or real. And I think artists now see the advantages of that. I think artists are beginning to understand how to have sort of like a multi-partite brain and relationship with technology, where it's not just corrosive, but actually maybe there's a tentacle or a facet of it that can be leveraged to tell a story or to connect with a different audience that is not it doesn't erode the value of what you create in a three-dimensional way that's intended for an exhibition or a gallery setting, but actually can be conducive to it. So I think those are the things we've seen, but we still have a long way to go. And the industry through all of that is still, as I said, is still lags a lot of other spheres in terms of its relationship to using these means. There's still a lot of outmoded business practices, but I think that will start to change a lot more, over the next years. And I think COVID in our industry, like many other industries, it's not that it radically shifted things. I think that it's brought changes that were going to come over a longer period of time and made them happen a lot more rapidly than they otherwise would have.
Yeah, no, it's very true actually. So for our gallery, we participated in the OVRs for both Hong Kong and Basel, and we'll be doing so in Miami. And for Miami is the first time, I think, because we've had a bit more time to just think it through. It's the first time where the artist is making some adjustments to the work that he was going to show.
Right.
Because we know that it'll just be shown online. So,
yeah.
And I do think that like more and more we'll be seeing artists and galleries kind of taking that into greater consideration. Sonia, could you speak to the extent you can, the plans for FOG in 2021? It's supposed to happen in the middle of January, and also as a patron and collector too, is like what you find is most compelling and works best in the online experience, and what you the sorts of changes and improvements you'd like to see.
For FOG, it's delayed until the next year. So we're keeping everybody that we've already approved, everything like that. But in respect of everything that's going on, it doesn't make sense to have an in-person fair. And Art Basel's responsibility to galleries and being able to provide the platform that they can is really important. I think FOG, as I was articulating earlier, is more of like a cultural moment. And even though it benefits SF MoMA, it's still not the financial decision that's being made. It's more for the community. I'm really curious, Noah, with the value of social media for artists and their outreach being legitimized. On the gallery side, is there any data on if collectors and people are buying through social media or using social media as like the starting point for that financial engagement?
Yeah, I mean, there is actually data, and if you look at, I mean, Claire in last year's report, which when I say last year, it was published in March. Actually, that was the last trip I was supposed to do, was to go to London to launch that report, and we canceled it. But there is really interesting data, and in a way, Instagram, you know, of all platforms, is sort of the default platform for this. You know, and I think, you know, that the interesting transition now is kind of how galleries are all upping their profile and leveraging these things to really create more direct means of contact. I mean, we're also seeing across the 4 online viewing rooms that we've done that ratio, right, of unique visitors to the site relative to on platform inquiries going to galleries each time we do this is trending up and up. I think, and that's a direct response to how collectors are beginning to understand how to use this, you know, how to use these platforms. But it's a slow burn too. And I think one of the things that we all are trying to do is, you know, that there's an immediacy. When you say Art Basel, you think of 90,000 people and, you know, this kind of crush of people at the gates, and transitioning from a perception of that to this digital world in which things are disconnected is a big shift. I think one of the most interesting things that we've introduced in that space are these Zoom walkthroughs, right, where we've worked with our global VIP representatives. We have a representative network of about 30 fantastic colleagues that you know that are people on the ground in different markets, and so they have started sort of curating these Zoom tours where they go through and pick a handful of galleries and really put gallerists and artists forward. And those have been amazing because those actually become that kind of connective platform on the site that feels very different, creates more of this event-driven feel. So I think as we think through this, we'll be putting a lot more emphasis on areas like that, where we can kind of play to our strengths as a connective platform to really create these moments of engagement, which have really nice spillover benefits, I think, to the galleries. You know, it's also been a way to get artists to speak through. There was this amazing Zoom I was on with one of our Turkish gallerists last week, and Nil Yalter, who is like a 70s era, you know, female video artist, was on. She was just on the Zoom, and it was so cool. You know, and so there, you know, technology has that, you know, enigmatic ability to create those kinds of connections.
Yeah, that's what I love about this moment, the silver lining, is that access has been blown wide open and transparency has become more of a thing. As a collector, I think about how it's easier in a way to further a relationship with a gallery, because it doesn't have to be this like in-person thing where I'm like, I've developed great relationships with some LA galleries, but that's because, you know, I'm going down there a lot. But then I think about, you know, New York galleries and international galleries, but now those pretenses can be dropped in favor of, okay, well, this is how we're doing this, so let's do this more often. And you know, with the online viewing rooms and everything, it feels like there's more thought around transparency as well. I think that as new systems get set up, reevaluation occurs, right? So the things that were being done before in the past a certain way, as they become digitized, in a way, there's kind of that cycle of, okay, wait, but why are we including that info? Why are we not including that info? Why are we doing it like this? Or what, you know, that reevaluation, I think, is super important with regards to the progress of what things are going to look like as we enter, I agree, this hybrid digital physical world. What is the value of each? How does it show up? And as a collector, that's exciting to me. I feel like there's a lot more opportunity to learn and connect with people in the community. It's sad it doesn't get to happen in person. I do miss that, like that spark and all that, you know, excitement from the in-person week of activities. But at the same time, this also feels more intentional. We have a finite amount of time that we're spending in front of the screen, and how we show up for that. So I think that the connections that are made, the things that get done also feel productive.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there's things, I mean, one thing I didn't mention earlier, but speaking of transparency was, as a fair organization, I mean, we've talked with years with our committees, with our gallerists about, you know, introducing prices into the system, right? When you come to Art Basel, should there be a price on the wall? And we've, for one reason or another, never gotten there. And yet when we introduced the online viewing room for our Hong Kong show based on data that we had come to read and see in the industry in terms of successive sales, strike rate of inquiries, et cetera, with price transparency, we made it as a prerequisite that you had to post either a price or a price range, which we actually just narrowed further with these latest online viewing rooms. And there's not been any real pushback on that. Galleries have gone along with that. And I think when we come out the other side of this rainbow, we will see a changed relationship to price transparency as a result of this, which is huge in the end. And it perhaps took a sort of moment of introspection to get there. But I do think that it's a very positive development ultimately for the industry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that completely too. I mean, just as a, we're not that invested in keeping our prices secret. Everyone knows what our price range is, but it's been refreshing to see it from like all across the board at different price levels and gallery levels and artist levels as well. Sonia, actually, so in speaking about kind of the sort of refreshing aspects of how you've been able to deepen relationships with some galleries that you would not have perhaps not have been able to connect with, and when we were relying on physical interactions, can you speak about like how has it been kind of like discovering new artists and galleries? Because I do think that that's an aspect where social media can be a very powerful tool, in that they have algorithms. So like it constantly is feeding you things that you're not familiar with. But is that something that you look at a lot? What are the other kinds of ways in which you sort of like keep up and just, forge these new relationships?
Yeah, I think to discover new artists, I like to focus on the artists first. So going to social media and going to Instagram, going to artists that I'm curious about, seeing who they follow, seeing what their tone is, their personality, how their work shows up, is a more immediate and intimate way, even though it's a voyeuristic way to engage with the artist, something that previously we didn't have access to, because either artists were like, I don't want to get on social media because of everything that Noah said, but also just there was this middleman kind of, you don't get access to the artist. So in that way, everyone's more online, so we get to kind of get a peek in and get to explore, and from the convenience of this magical brick we have in our hands, that's pretty cool. And it's also been able to further my relationships with, I think, institutional leaders and gallerists who are leading these Zoom walks, who I get to engage with more often, don't have to be in person, see their personality, understand the gallery's vibe. These are all things that have been a wonderful way to engage as a touch point. And I don't know, I'm a millennial, so I kind of grew up socializing online. So I still remember a friend of mine, an analog friend of mine, asked me, how did you meet a bunch of this group of people? I was like, oh, Twitter, Instagram, then connected through this. So for me, I'm like, it's really natural to slide into someone's DM and be like, hey, what's up? Let's connect. I want to learn more. I want to learn more about this artist, or I want to learn more about, your process, whatever it is. I don't have barriers anymore. And that feels exciting. That feels like I don't have to go to somebody to expand my learning and my understanding, and even my vulnerability with people. I can do that. So that's something that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think we'll come out of all of this with kind of a newly calibrated dynamics about like the IRL versus online engagement. I mean, something that I think is fascinating is, that a group of Latin American galleries during Art Basel Miami Week will be organizing a pop-up show in Mexico City. So because for Latin, for particularly for the Latin American market, Art Basel Miami is their, most important, biggest week. And I think due to like quarantine concerns and things like that, they felt like traveling to Miami and doing a pop-up there was too risky. So they're doing it in Mexico City. So obviously, really, they'll be relying on this kind of online engagement, but they are also organizing a physical show at the same time. So like these kinds of projects, to be honest, I don't know how successful it'll be, but I do find it fascinating, all of these sorts of experiments that are happening.
Well, I think
It's
it's an
great.
experiment. I mean, I think my sense, Keybum, is one of the things. Sorry, Sonia, to speak over you, but I think one of the things that we're seeing now, and it's like everybody always loved to complain about art fairs and there's too much travel, there's too much. And on the one hand, I think that there's an absolute validity to that, right? On the other hand, I think what the last 9 months or so have proved is that it's bloody difficult to sell art without the sort of time limited parameters of a fair or an auction or that opening, right? And so I think what these Mexican gallerists are doing, which in some ways replicates what a number of Berlin gallerists did in September, sort of the opening of the season, is to really just kind of come together. I think this notion of collectivity and community is really key. And to what degree will people be going into this site that they're doing that? It's clearly not happening en masse. I think there were even some discussions within this community of gallerists of doing an opening event, which I think they've backed away from, for very justified concerns. But I think that there is this kind of sense that collectively they can bring something together and make something more as 10 galleries in a singular space than they can otherwise do in their own spaces. And I think there's a charitable aspect to it as well. I think that they'll be donating a certain portion of their proceeds to a few of the leading institutions, Tamayo and others, and that's awesome. I mean, that's just like such a cool phenomenon, and I do think that we'll see more of this. And I think already with Condo and these sort of shared gallery community models, what we've seen also with Platform LA, this spring and summer, albeit digitally. I think that this notion of collectivity and community is a really cool thing, and I think we already were seeing some of that. I think we'll see a lot more in the next years.
I really think it goes back to the ecosystem that you're talking about, and especially during these times, people can save on marketing costs, customer acquisition costs, like, costs for the OVR, when they can band together and split some of those things and leverage each other's audiences and existing.
Totally.
And the best part right now is, in a way, everyone's trying something. So even though it might not be great, the risk is really low because everyone's kind of falling on their face and go, okay, that didn't work. We're going to try it this way next time. And that's the beauty of a learning curve. And we're still in it. We're just like, what, I don't know, 8-10 months into this mess.
Yeah, no, and for sure. I mean,
sometimes it takes a dinosaur to get people's attention, for example.
Yeah. I mean, that has, as a gallerist, like that has been one of the kind of the bright linings through all this, has been increased collaborations and that kind of spirit and just gestures of generosity among gallerists. It could be a competitive setting and sometimes, but like in the Bay Area, Mickey started the initiative, and there's like a online platform of, is it 5 galleries or 7?
8 Bridges is the name, but yeah, it's an amalgamation of like 6 or 8 different ones.
Yeah, and LA has gallery platform that Jeffrey Deitch spearheaded, and feel like these sorts of like models of collaboration is happening more and more. I do want to get a question from Jonathan's asking, are fairs considering VR and AR technology, thinking about advocating for it, or waiting for gallerists, artists to request or want that tech? Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all looking at a lot of this simultaneously, right? And I think also a matter of prioritization. I think from our vantage, we wanted to act as quickly and decisively rather as we could to get as much content together as quickly as possible to kind of create these moments. And I think inevitably, as again, people and communities get more comfortable and more attuned to how this works, I think you're going to see a lot more experimentation, in some of these realms, both from within art fair land, I think within gallery land, and then also, within the realm of art making itself, like artists as practitioners and really using these technologies. I know Daniel Birnbaum in London with Acute Art has done a lot of these projects with, whether it's Olafur Eliasson or Kujong Ah or Jeff Koons and others, and so we're going to see more, not less, of this in the future. I think that as it relates to AR and VR technology, the key thing, for us as a fair, that's a big consideration is how to leverage those kind of technologies to drive interactions and to drive sales. And there, I think the verdict is a little bit more out. But again, as people start shifting into and taking up these technologies, and I think that we will see pretty radical shifts in the next years around some of this.
Yeah.
Speaking from Fog's perspective, I don't think we could take that on. However, I run a content production studio, and I've actually, part of the services that we've been offering is to record like AR, VR. And I've been approaching a number of galleries, inquiring if they would be interested in those services. But I think it's still too early. People are still too fearful, especially around like capital funds being tied up. And I think the other big question is, who's the audience? If it's going to be a younger audience that's engaging with VR and AR, what is the price point that they're spending? Does it make sense to make that kind of content investment or production investment for every show, for example? So I think these questions are still unanswered. I mean, if it's a largely older audience who's not going to put on VR goggles because the JPEG is just fine, I don't see a reason why galleries would want to spend the time and money to make that kind of specialized content at this moment in time.
Yeah. But something that I have been seeing is, I think it's more institutions that may have signed up, but galleries and museums doing, I don't know what you call it, but those kinds of like fish eye, like walk through things where you can really like feel like you're in that space. But I think before we get to hardcore VR, AR, we have to figure out the kind of like the rendering where they place the artwork like on the wall so people get a sense for scale. Because even that, like just the OVRs that we participated in, we're realizing if it's not perfectly flat and photographed in a certain way, it just looks so wonky.
Yeah, I mean, the other relevant question there is kind of like the extent to which we need to replicate the real world digitally, and is that, I mean, Sonia's much more of an expert probably certainly than I am on this, right? But like, do we need to replicate the reality that we're used to, or would we rather move into a different reality that people that are more sort of digitally native are accustomed to using in this world? And I sense that the latter is probably the cure, or the the direction that more things will move in rather than the former. And so, as a business, and Art Basel is a business, galleries in the end are businesses, you have limited resources and you have to allocate those resources somewhere. And I think, my sense is that there's a more creative solution to a lot of this than trying to kind of spend a lot of money to replicate like the feeling and setting of being in this space. And I think we'll see where this goes, but I think certainly from our developmental standpoint, we'll be moving more probably in a different direction, than that.
I agree. I think digital experiences, sorry, I was saying that I think digital experiences that replicate, in real life too much, there's a memento mori there, thinking about all the Zooms that we've been on ever since the beginning, we felt the fatigue of it. It's that representation of something that we've lost and it's not quite there. It feels dishonest and inauthentic. And I also think about, like, you know, when Travis Scott released his new album at the beginning of COVID on Twitch, and was that incredible like VR experience, and what a hit that was. That looked nothing like the real world. And that was part of why it was a hit, because it tapped into that creativity and wasn't like trying so hard to be this shadow, this ghost of something we once knew.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely that kind of like uncanny valley quality when you try to like make things look as realistic as possible. And I mean, something that I'm looking forward to is like, I do think that as we are engaging with art more online, some artists will really do an artwork that is made specifically for the online viewing experience. It might not be kind of like, you know, appropriate for like a fair situation, but I think there could be like more exciting exhibitions that we see. You know, we could go on forever, but you know, it's already, we've passed the hour mark. I want to thank our guests for this knitting. Yeah, Noah, do you want to say something?
No, before we do our sign-offs, Kibum, I'm looking at our art market report from last year to answer Sonia's question from the beginning. Okay. And the statistics, Sonia, and for everybody that's listening, is that 61% of high net worth collectors that we surveyed last year had used Instagram to purchase art. Now, what 61% have used it to purchase. So whether that's like directly acquiring it through there or using it as a tool in the journey, you know, is part of the question. And that was most prevalent in the US and Europe, and a little less so in Asia, where I think there's other social media channels that play a larger role, whether that's WeChat or Weibo. So, but 61% is the answer to your question from the beginning.
Oh my God, thank you for answering that, because I bought these not off of Instagram, but I saw it on Instagram and then contacted the gallery. And I've just been thinking about, I'm like, am I a minority, or am I like an outlier, or a common in the common range? So thank you, super helpful.
Yeah, no, and like we've had that happen too. And our gallery program is not exactly conducive to, you know, standing out on Instagram, but I mean, I do think it's something that, particularly the algorithm, you know, allowing for that sort of like a discovery of new artworks is a very, very, very powerful tool. But 61% is very high, you know, because some of the audience,
again, that doesn't mean that that's like an in-app or like the, you know, the Instagram shopping thing, but it's, you know, people using it as a tool for discovery and for inquiry, right? Like that's, I mean, it's pretty profound. And I think, you know, what Claire finds in her research is that the most important usage of it really is as a very powerful, high octane marketing tool. And I think we're just seeing more and more people, right, of all varying stripes, understanding how to use it in that fashion. You know, for Art Basel as well. I mean, we have, I think, over 3.5 million social media followers across our different accounts, in excess of 2 million now on Instagram. The question then is like, how do we really convert that and help drive business back to our galleries, to support them, to support the artists, to support our corporate partners and others. So it's very powerful. And I think we're all in this exploratory mode now as we try to ascertain like what that actually means, for all of us.
Yeah. No, and you know, and just to close, is like as zoomed out as we all are, I think one of the great things has been being able to participate in and also like sit in on all these conversations, bringing folks together from different places. So thank you so much. You know, I know it's quite late, getting late in New York, and then Sonia and Noah, and you know, hopefully we will have results of the election soon, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in real life at fairs again, because I do think, yeah, as Noah said, you know, despite all of the talk about fair fatigue, everyone desperately misses going to art fairs now. We see it's such an integral part of the business. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kibum. Sonia, great seeing you on a computer screen this evening. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jonathan.
Good to see you. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Kibum. Have a good evening. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.